Today, we're talking about one of the biggest mistakes that I see business leaders make with AI. Many leaders are treating AI and large language models as if they're the same thing, and they try and solve every business problem using an LLM. But here's the twist: trying to use large language models to solve every problem is exactly why many AI projects are failing. In fact, many times the most valuable AI use cases don't use an LLM at all. I've spent 20 years working in AI and data science with companies like Apple and Bank of America. And today, this misconception about AI is destroying a lot of AI projects. So, in this video, I'm going to quickly explain when large language models are great tools to use and when they're generally bad to use. And this will help you make much better decisions about how to use AI in your own business. Let's start with the core of the problem. Many business leaders think that AI means large language models like ChatGPT or Claude. Even though LLMs are very powerful tools, they are often kind of bad choices for various types of problems. So, what I'm seeing right now is that many executives and business leaders are trying to use LLMs for just about everything: forecasting, churn, customer segmentation, customer analytics, lead scoring, various customer acquisition initiatives. It kind of goes on and on. And while you can use large language models for some parts of those use cases, many times an LLM isn't going to be the best tool. So, let me give you a couple of examples. If you need to understand your customers, you can use a large language model for that, but there might be some other tools and techniques that you can use, like masked language models. You can also use various decision trees depending on how you're using those to understand customer needs and preferences. You can also use various exploratory AI techniques, things like customer segmentation, to segment your customers and then analyze into your different customer segments to understand your customers better. That's something where you can use a large language model, maybe in certain small ways, but there's, as I said, a variety of other tools that you can use to understand your customers. If we're talking about things like churn, if you want to predict churn, you're not going to use a large language model. If you need to forecast just about anything in your business, whether you're talking about forecasting demand, forecasting revenues, any sort of future looking forecast, an LLM in many cases isn't going to be as good as other tools. I could kind of go on and on about various misapplications of large language models, but ultimately, what this does is it causes wasted money, bad outputs, unreliable systems, and maybe worse, it creates a sort of lack of trust in quote unquote AI. People stop believing that AI can do anything useful in a business, which, by the way, couldn't be further from the truth. By the way, if you want to understand how ready your business is to use AI to maximum effect, take my AI readiness assessment. You can find the link in the description. Click on the link. It'll only take you a few minutes and it will tell you how ready your business is to use AI across 4 different domains. Click on the link and take the AI readiness assessment. So, what's the solution to this? To fix this problem, you need to understand the range of different AI tools, and then you need to match particular AI tools to particular business problems. So, large language models, for the most part, are really good at generating text. Anytime you're generating text, you probably want to use a large language model. That also includes things like question and answer sessions, text summarization, translation, and so on. You can also use large language models for reasoning and certain types of workflow automation. But once we start using LLMs in that way, we're starting to get into agentic AI, which is different enough that I often put it in a sort of different category. But AI agents are based on large language models currently. In contrast to generative AI and large language models, there are other types of AI. So I've already kind of mentioned these, but let me lay these out a little more clearly. We have predictive AI, and whenever you're making a prediction about something, either making a prediction about customer behavior like upsell propensity or churn, you're typically going to use a predictive model. Same thing with forecasting. You're very often going to use a type of predictive system. In the industry, we call this supervised learning. It's a type of more classic machine learning, although we could call this a type of AI. Now, I will say here, in some cases, you can use a large language model to do some predictive modeling. The problem is that again, they're often not as precise, they are not as accurate, they hallucinate way more often, and they're often much less cost effective. So again, if you need to make predictions or forecasts in your business, you generally need predictive AI. You also have exploratory AI. That's a third type that I like to talk about. And exploratory AI finds previously unseen patterns in data sets. We very frequently use this for either product strategy or marketing strategy. So things like go to market, we're very frequently going to start with an exploratory technique like customer segmentation. Same thing with product development. Then a fourth type of AI that I like to talk about is agentic AI. Now, as I said previously, AI agents are typically built with a large language model at their core, but they're different enough that I typically talk about them as a separate category. An AI agent has an LLM at the center, and then we connect various memory systems, databases, document stores, external tools, and so on. And we build a system that can act independent of a human being for the most part, usually to automate various processes and workflows. One mistake in particular that I'm seeing a lot of leaders and entrepreneurs make is they think that they can take an off the shelf LLM and then just give it a special prompt and it's going to be a quote unquote agent. That's really not what an agent is. A proper AI agent has a full architecture where you need to think about, again, memory management, state management, tool selection, and tool use. And then there's a whole set of other problems around evaluating the outputs of agents, ongoing training to make sure that they work properly, and so on. So AI agents are actually very complicated and much more complicated than just taking, let's say, Claude or ChatGPT and giving them a simple prompt. That works sometimes, but typically not if you have serious ongoing work that you need done in your business. And those four types of AI, generative AI, predictive, exploratory, and agentic AI, those are just the four maybe most common and most important. There are even others that I haven't talked about, things like computer vision, essentially teaching computer systems how to see via cameras and video systems, and a few others. What I'm trying to emphasize here is different business problems require different types of AI. You need to know the full AI toolkit. You need to understand which types of AI tools solve which types of problems. Admittedly, understanding these things and kind of getting it right can be a big challenge in a business, especially right now as AI is moving very, very quickly. It can be very confusing. One of the best ways to solve this problem is to have executive level guidance about AI inside of a business. And that's why I recommend that most businesses should have a chief AI officer, a CIO, either permanently or at least a fractional CIO. That being said, if you want to understand how a CIO can help your business, check out this next video on chief AI officers.